The bitter wind cut through Zelda Crawford's threadbare coat like 1,000 frozen knives as she stumbled through the snow, each step heavier than the last, her vision blurring until the world became nothing but white and cold, and the absolute certainty that she would die alone in this God-forsaken wilderness of Nevada territory. It was December 1868, and Zelda had been traveling for 3 weeks, fleeing from a life in San Francisco that had crumbled around her like a house built on sand. Her father had died 6 months ago, leaving her with nothing but debts, and the unwanted attention of a man twice her age who claimed her father had promised her hand in marriage to settle what was owed. At 22 years old, Zelda had decided she would rather face the unknown than submit to a future she could not stomach. She had heard there was work in Virginia City, that women with education could find positions as teachers or governesses. But the stagecoach had broken an axle 2 days outside of Genoa, and the driver had told them they would need to wait in the small Mormon settlement while repairs were made. Zelda had enough money for either lodging or the remainder of her passage, but not both. She had chosen to keep moving, thinking she could walk to the next ranch and perhaps find shelter and work there. That decision was killing her now. Her feet no longer felt like part of her body. The numbness had crept up past her ankles, and she could not remember when she had last felt her fingers. The carpet bag she had been carrying had fallen from her grip somewhere back along the trail, and she could not recall dropping it. Everything seemed distant now, as though she were watching herself from somewhere outside her own skin. The snow had started falling heavier about an hour ago, and the wind had picked up until she could barely see 5 feet ahead. She had lost the trail completely. Zelda fell to her knees in the snow, and the cold that had been her enemy suddenly felt almost warm, almost welcoming. She knew this was the end, knew that the drowsiness creeping over her was death disguised as comfort. Part of her wanted to fight it, but the larger part was simply too tired. She had been fighting for so long, fighting to keep her father alive when the consumption took him, fighting to keep their small apartment when the bills piled up, fighting to maintain her dignity when that awful man came calling with his legal documents and his possessive smile. She was tired of fighting. Zelda let herself sink down into the snow, her cheek pressing against the frozen ground. The wind howled around her, but it seemed distant now, unimportant. She closed her eyes and thought of her mother, dead these 10 years, and wondered if she would see her soon. The thought brought her a strange peace. She did not hear the horse approaching, did not feel the strong hands that pulled her from the snow, did not know that her life was about to change in ways she could never have imagined. Xander Kelley had been riding the fence line of his ranch when he spotted what he first thought was a fallen animal in the distance. The storm had come up fast, and he had been hurrying to get back to the ranch house before it got any worse. But something about the shape in the snow made him pause, made him turn his horse toward it despite the wind and the cold. As he got closer, his heart lurched in his chest. It was a woman, and she was not moving. He was off his horse in an instant, dropping to his knees beside her. She was slight, her face pale as death, her lips tinged with blue. For a terrible moment he thought he was too late, but then he saw the shallow rise and fall of her chest. She was alive, but barely. Xander did not hesitate. He gathered her into his arms, surprised by how light she was, how fragile she felt against his chest. He managed to get her onto his horse, holding her in front of him as he turned the animal toward home. The ranch house was only a mile away, but it felt like 10 as he urged his horse through the deepening snow, keeping one arm locked around the woman to keep her from falling. The ride seemed to take forever, but finally, the buildings of his ranch came into view. He had built the main house himself, 5 years ago when he was 25, after he had saved enough money from working other men's ranches to buy his own land. It was not much, just a few hundred acres and a small herd of cattle, but it was his, and he had made it into something he could be proud of. The house was solid timber with a stone fireplace that could heat the whole main room. He kept it well stocked with firewood, and right now he thanked God for that habit. He carried the woman inside, kicking the door shut behind him against the wind. The fire in the hearth had burned down to embers, but he quickly built it back up, adding log after log until flames were crackling and sending warmth into the room. Only then did he turn his full attention to the woman. He laid her on the buffalo hide rug in front of the fire and began to assess her condition. Her clothes were soaked through, ice crystals clinging to the fabric. He knew he needed to get her out of the wet garments, but propriety warred with necessity. Propriety lost. If he did not act, she would die. Working as quickly and respectfully as he could, Xander removed her wet coat, her boots, her dress and petticoats. He tried not to look more than necessary, tried to think of her only as someone who needed help, not as a woman. He wrapped her in thick wool blankets from his bed, tucking them around her carefully. Her skin was ice cold to the touch, and he could see her breathing was still shallow and labored. He had seen frostbite before, had seen what happened to men caught out in storms. He checked her hands and feet, relieved to see that while they were pale and cold, they did not yet show the blackening that meant the flesh was dead. There was still hope. Xander hung her wet clothes near the fire to dry, then set about warming the house further. He closed the shutters on the windows to keep out the wind, put more wood on the fire, and heated water in a kettle. When it was warm but not hot, he soaked cloths in it and gently pressed them to her hands and feet, trying to bring warmth back gradually. He had heard that warming someone too quickly could be as dangerous as the cold itself. For hours he worked, tending to her, keeping the fire going, checking her breathing. Slowly, painfully slowly, color began to return to her face. Her breathing deepened, became more regular. As night fell and the storm raged outside, she started to shiver, and Xander knew this was a good sign. Her body was fighting to warm itself. He made himself coffee and sat in the chair near the fire, watching her through the night. He could not have said why he felt so protective of this stranger, why the sight of her lying so vulnerable made something in his chest tighten. He only knew that now that he had saved her, he felt responsible for her, felt a connection that made no logical sense. Dawn came gray and cold, the storm still howling outside. Xander had dozed in his chair a few times, but mostly he had stayed awake, watching to make sure she kept breathing, adding wood to the fire, checking that the blankets stayed tucked around her. It was mid-morning when her eyes finally opened. Zelda woke in confusion, her mind foggy and slow. She was warm, wonderfully warm, and for a moment she thought she must be dead and this was heaven. But then awareness crept in, bringing with it 1,000 questions. Where was she? How had she gotten here? Why did her hands and feet hurt so much? She tried to sit up and realized she was wrapped in blankets. Thick, heavy blankets that smelled of wood smoke and something else. Something masculine and unfamiliar but not unpleasant. The room around her was unfamiliar, made of heavy timber, with a large stone fireplace where a fire burned cheerfully. And sitting in a chair near the fire, watching her with eyes the color of a storm cloud, was a man. Zelda gasped and pulled the blankets tighter around herself, suddenly aware that she was wearing only her undergarments beneath them. The man held up his hands in a gesture of peace. Easy now. You are safe. I found you in the snow yesterday, brought you here to my ranch. You nearly froze to death. His voice was deep and calm, with a slight drawl that spoke of years spent in the West. He was handsome in a rugged way, with dark hair that fell across his forehead, a strong jaw shadowed with stubble, and broad shoulders that spoke of hard work and strength. He looked to be perhaps 30 years old, maybe a bit younger. "Where am I?" Zelda managed to ask, her voice coming out as barely more than a whisper. "My ranch, about 5 miles north of Genoa, Nevada territory. Name is Xander Kelley. I found you collapsed in the snow on my property." "Do you remember anything?" Zelda closed her eyes, trying to piece together her memories. "I was walking. The stage coach broke down. I thought I could reach the next ranch, find work, but the storm came up and I could not find the trail anymore. You are lucky I was riding fence when I spotted you. Another hour and it would have been too late." His voice was gentle but firm. "What is your name?" "Zelda Crawford." She looked down at the blankets, at her bare arms visible where they clutched the fabric. "My clothes, had to remove them. They were soaked through, would have kept you cold. I hung them by the fire to dry. They should be ready soon." He stood up and moved to the fireplace, giving her his back. "I will get them for you, give you privacy to dress. There is food when you are ready. You need to eat." He gathered her clothes, which were indeed dry now, and handed them to her without looking directly at her. "I will be outside tending the horses. Come to the kitchen when you are dressed." Then he was gone, the door closing behind him, leaving Zelda alone in the warm room with 1,000 thoughts racing through her mind. She dressed slowly, her hands and feet still aching, her movements stiff and awkward. Her dress was wrinkled from its time near the fire, but it was clean and dry. As she pulled on her boots, she tried to make sense of her situation. This man, this Xander Kelley, had saved her life. He had removed her wet clothes, which must have been terribly improper, but necessary. He had tended to her through the night, kept her warm, brought her back from the edge of death. She owed him her life. The thought was both humbling and terrifying. What did one do with such a debt? How did one repay it? Zelda looked around the room with clearer eyes now. It was simple but well made, everything neat and orderly. There was a small kitchen area with a cast iron stove, a table with 2 chairs, shelves with supplies. The main room held the fireplace, the chair where he had sat watching her, and what looked like the door to another room, probably a bedroom. It was the home of a man who lived alone but lived with purpose and care. She made her way to the kitchen area on unsteady legs, leaning on furniture for support. On the table, she found bread, cheese, and what looked like dried venison. Her stomach growled, reminding her that she had not eaten in over a day. She was cutting herself a piece of bread when the door opened and Xander came back in, stamping snow from his boots. "Storm is still going strong," he said, pulling off his coat and hat. "Looks like it will be another day before anyone can travel." Zelda felt a flutter of nervousness. Another day here, alone with this stranger. But what choice did she have? "I am grateful to you, Mr. Kelley," she said formally. "You saved my life. I do not know how I can ever repay such a debt." He waved off her thanks as he moved to the stove and poured himself coffee from a battered pot. "No debt. Any decent person would have done the same. You are welcome to stay until the storm passes and you are strong enough to travel. Where were you headed?" "Virginia City." "I heard there might be work for a teacher there." Xander raised an eyebrow. "Long way from here." "You planning to walk the whole way?" "I had money for the stage coach, but I needed to save it for the fare. I thought I could make it to the next ranch, perhaps find work there for a while." Even as she said it, Zelda realized how foolish it sounded. You could have died. There was no judgment in his voice, only statement of fact. "I know that now." Zelda looked down at her hands. "I was desperate. I needed to leave San Francisco and I had nowhere else to go." She did not know why she was telling him this, why this stranger seemed to invite confidence. Maybe it was because he had saved her life. Maybe it was because his eyes, when he looked at her, held kindness rather than the calculating appraisal she had grown used to from men. "What were you running from?" Xander asked, sitting down across from her at the table. Zelda hesitated, then decided there was no point in lying. "A man who claimed my father owed him a debt, who claimed my father had promised me to him in marriage. I refused, and the law was on his side. So I left." Xander's jaw tightened. What kind of man tries to claim a woman like property? The kind with money and no conscience. Zelda met his eyes. "I would rather have died in that snow than become his wife." "You do not have to worry about that here," Xander said firmly. "You are safe on my ranch. When the storm clears, I will take you to Genoa myself. There might be work there, or we can arrange for you to continue to Virginia City if that is what you want." "Why are you being so kind to me?" The question slipped out before Zelda could stop it. Xander was quiet for a long moment, his fingers wrapped around his coffee cup. "My sister died 5 years ago. She was traveling to meet me here to start a new life in Nevada. Her husband had died, and she had nothing left in Missouri. But the wagon train she was with was attacked by bandits. She did not make it." His voice was steady, but Zelda could hear the old pain in it. "I was not there to help her when she needed it. Maybe saving you is some small way of making up for that." "I am sorry about your sister," Zelda said softly, "but you cannot save her by saving me. That is not how it works." "I know." Xander looked at her, and something in his eyes made her breath catch. "But I can make sure you have a chance at the life you are looking for. That is something." For 3 days the storm raged, keeping them trapped inside the ranch house. In that time, Zelda and Xander learned about each other in the way that only forced proximity can teach. They talked about their pasts, their dreams, their fears. Zelda told him about growing up in San Francisco, about her mother who had died when she was 12, about her father who had tried his best, but had been broken by grief and drink. Xander told her about growing up on a farm in Kansas, about coming west at 18 to make his fortune, about the hard years of working for other men before he finally had enough to buy his own land. They cooked together, Zelda surprised to find that Xander was actually a decent cook, though his repertoire was limited to practical meals that kept a working man fed. She taught him how to make biscuits the way her mother had, and the smile on his face when he tasted them made something warm bloom in her chest. They played cards in the evening, betting matchsticks since neither had any money to spare. Zelda won more often than not, and Xander accused her of counting cards. She only smiled and dealt another hand. They talked late into the night, the fire burning low, the wind howling outside. Xander told her about his dreams of expanding the ranch, of having a herd big enough to make a real profit, of building a life here in this wild land. Zelda talked about her love of books, her hope of teaching children, of making a difference in young lives the way some of her teachers had made a difference in hers. And slowly, without either of them quite realizing when it happened, something shifted between them. It was in the way Xander looked at her when he thought she was not watching, his eyes soft and wondering. It was in the way Zelda found herself listening for his footsteps, the way her heart beat a little faster when he came into the room. It was in the comfortable silences that fell between them, pregnant with unspoken things. On the third evening, as they sat by the fire after dinner, Xander reached over and took her hand. It was the first time he had touched her since that first day, and the contact sent electricity racing up her arm. "Zelda," he said, and her name sounded like something precious in his mouth. "I know we have not known each other long. I know this is probably not proper or sensible. But I need to tell you something." Zelda's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. What? I do not want you to leave when the storm ends. The words came out in a rush, as if he had been holding them back and they had finally burst free. I mean, I know you have your plans and I will take you to Genoa if that is what you want, but I want you to know that you could stay here, with me. There is work here if you want it, or no work at all if you prefer. You could just stay and let me take care of you. Xander, I cannot just stay here, Zelda said, but her protest was weak. The truth was, she had been dreading the storm ending, dreading the moment when she would have to leave this warm house and this man who had become so important to her in such a short time. Why not? He squeezed her hand gently. Give me one good reason. Because I have known you for 3 days, because it would not be proper, because people would talk. The reasons sounded hollow even to her own ears. I do not care what people say. I have lived alone on this ranch for 5 years, and I have been content with it. But these past 3 days, having you here, it has made me realize what I have been missing. I wake up happy because I know I will see your face. I look forward to meals because we will eat them together. The house feels like a home instead of just a place to sleep. He reached up and cupped her face with his other hand, his touch gentle. Zelda Crawford, I am falling in love with you. I know it is too soon. I know it is crazy, but it is the truth. Zelda felt tears pricking her eyes. I am falling in love with you too. But Xander, what are you asking me? To be your housekeeper, your companion? I ran from San Francisco to escape being claimed by a man. I will not trade one cage for another. Then marry me. The words were simple, direct, and they took her breath away. Not because you owe me anything, not because you have no other choice. Marry me because in 3 days you have become more important to me than anything else in my life. Marry me because when I think about my future now, you are in every part of it. Marry me because I want to spend the rest of my life making you happy. You do not know me, Zelda whispered, but she was leaning into his touch, her eyes searching his face. I know you are brave. I know you would rather risk death than give up your freedom. I know you are kind and clever and funny. I know that your smile makes my heart race and your laugh is the best sound I have ever heard. What else do I need to know? That I am stubborn and opinionated and I will not be a proper obedient wife. That I will argue with you and challenge you and probably drive you to distraction. Good, Xander said, and then he was kissing her, his lips warm and gentle against hers, and Zelda felt the last of her resistance crumble. When they pulled apart, both breathless, Xander rested his forehead against hers. Is that a yes? It is a maybe, Zelda said, but she was smiling. Ask me again in the morning when I have had time to think clearly. I will ask you every morning for the rest of our lives if that is what it takes. That night, Zelda slept in Xander's bed while he took the rug by the fire, both of them stubbornly proper despite the emotions running between them. But Zelda did not sleep much. She lay in the darkness, breathing in the scent of him that clung to the blankets, thinking about his proposal. It was madness. She had known him for 3 days. 3 days against a lifetime was nothing. Any sensible person would say she was being foolish, that she was trading one bad situation for another without thinking it through. But Zelda had learned that being sensible did not always lead to happiness. Her father had been sensible, marrying her mother because their families expected it, working at a job he hated because it was respectable, and he had been miserable. Her mother had been sensible, accepting her lot in life without complaint, never asking for more than she had. And she had died young and worn out. What if, just once, Zelda chose something because it felt right rather than because it made sense? What if she took this chance, this incredible, unexpected chance that had fallen into her lap along with the snow? When morning came, gray and quiet, the storm finally having blown itself out, Zelda got dressed and went to the main room. Xander was already up making coffee, and he turned when he heard her, his eyes questioning and hopeful and vulnerable in a way that made her love him even more. "Ask me," she said. He set down the coffee pot and crossed to her in 3 long strides. Taking both her hands in his, he looked into her eyes and said, "Zelda Crawford, will you marry me? Will you stay here and build a life with me? Will you take a chance on this crazy cowboy who fell in love with you in 3 days?" "Yes," Zelda said, and the smile that broke across Xander's face was like the sun coming out after a storm. "Yes to all of it." He picked her up and spun her around, both of them laughing like children, and when he set her down, he kissed her again, longer and deeper this time, a kiss that sealed a promise and started a future. 2 weeks later, they were married in Genoa by a traveling preacher who came through once a month. The ceremony was simple, held in the small church with only a handful of witnesses, but to Zelda it was perfect. She wore a dress that Xander had bought her in town, simple blue calico but new and clean and hers. He wore his best shirt and had trimmed his beard for the occasion. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, and Xander kissed her in front of God and those few witnesses, Zelda felt a joy so complete it was almost frightening in its intensity. They rode back to the ranch together, Zelda sitting in front of Xander on his horse, his arms around her keeping her safe and warm. The winter sun was setting, painting the snow-covered landscape in shades of pink and gold, and Zelda thought she had never seen anything more beautiful. That night, in the privacy of their bedroom, they came together as husband and wife, and Zelda discovered that the passion she felt for this man was matched by tenderness and care. Xander was gentle with her, patient, making sure she felt cherished and desired. And when they lay together afterward, her head on his chest, his arms around her, Zelda knew she had made the right choice. This was where she belonged. The first year of their marriage was not easy. The ranch was struggling and money was tight. They worked from dawn to dusk, Xander tending the cattle and mending fences while Zelda managed the house and helped wherever else she could. She learned to milk the cow, to churn butter, to preserve vegetables for winter. She learned to shoot a rifle when Xander insisted she needed to be able to protect herself when he was out on the range. She learned the rhythm of ranch life, the cycles of seasons, the satisfaction of hard work and earned rest. But it was also the happiest year of Zelda's life. Every morning she woke up next to the man she loved. Every evening they ate dinner together and talked about their day. Every night they fell asleep in each other's arms. They argued sometimes, because Zelda had been right about being stubborn and opinionated, and Xander had his own strong opinions about how things should be done. But they always made up, usually with laughter and kisses, and their bond only grew stronger. In the spring, Zelda discovered she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, but she waited to tell Xander until she was sure. When she finally told him over dinner one evening, his reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He whooped with joy, picked her up carefully, and then immediately set her down again, worried he might hurt her or the baby. "We are having a baby," he kept saying, his voice full of wonder. "We are going to be parents. Are you happy?" Zelda asked, though she could see the answer written all over his face. Happy does not begin to cover it. He knelt down in front of her and placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "Hello in there, little one. This is your papa. I cannot wait to meet you." The pregnancy was not easy. Zelda was sick for the first 3 months, barely able to keep anything down. Xander was patient and attentive, bringing her weak tea and dry toast, holding her hair back when she was ill, never complaining about the extra work he had to do when she was too weak to help. As her belly grew, Zelda found herself overwhelmed with emotions. Fear that something would go wrong, that she would lose this baby the way so many women lost theirs. joy at the thought of holding her child in her arms, wonder at the miracle growing inside her. And love, so much love for this tiny person she had never met, but who was already the center of her world. Xander was endlessly fascinated by her changing body, placing his hand on her belly to feel the baby kick, talking to the baby at night before they went to sleep. He was also fiercely protective, insisting that Zelda not lift anything heavy or work too hard. She found it both touching and sometimes frustrating, especially when she felt fine and he was treating her like she was made of glass. "I am pregnant, not dying," she told him one day when he had physically taken a bucket of water out of her hands. "I know, but I want to make sure both of you are safe," he replied stubbornly. "Let me take care of you." In the end, Zelda learned to let him, understanding that this was his way of showing love, his way of dealing with his own fears about the birth. Their son was born on a cold January morning in 1870, exactly 1 year and 1 month after Zelda had collapsed in the snow on Xander's ranch. The birth was long and difficult, with only a midwife from Genoa to help since the doctor was snowed in at another ranch. Xander paced outside for hours, listening to Zelda's cries of pain and feeling helpless and terrified. But when the midwife finally opened the door and told him he had a healthy son and his wife was tired but well, Xander felt tears streaming down his face. He rushed into the room to find Zelda propped up in bed, exhausted and pale but smiling, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. "Meet your son," she said softly, and Xander approached reverently, as if he were approaching something holy. The baby was small and red-faced, with a shock of dark hair and tiny fists waving in the air. As Xander watched, his son opened his eyes and looked directly at him, and Xander felt his heart expand in a way he had not known was possible. "He is perfect," Xander whispered. "You are perfect, thank you." They named him Nathan Xander Kelley. Nathan after Zelda's father and Xander because Zelda insisted their firstborn should carry his father's name in some way. Little Nathan was a good baby, healthy and strong, and watching him grow became the joy of both their lives. The ranch began to prosper in the years that followed. Xander worked harder than ever, expanding the herd, building new fences, improving the house. Zelda managed everything else, raising Nathan, keeping the accounts, tending the garden, and even helping with the cattle when extra hands were needed. They hired a ranch hand named Tom who proved to be trustworthy and hardworking, and with his help, Xander was able to increase their holdings significantly. By the time Nathan was 3, they had saved enough money to add on to the house, building a second bedroom for their son and a proper parlor for receiving the rare visitor. Zelda filled the parlor with books, ordering them from San Francisco, creating a small library that became her favorite place in the house. She began teaching Nathan his letters as soon as he was old enough to understand, determined that her son would have the education she valued so highly. Their second child, a daughter they named Emily Rose, was born in the spring of 1873. Her birth was easier than Nathan's, and Xander swore the girl came into the world smiling. She had Zelda's dark hair and eyes, and from the start she was a happy, curious child who got into everything. Nathan, now 3, was fascinated by his baby sister, constantly wanting to hold her and help take care of her. Life fell into a comfortable rhythm. The ranch continued to grow, and with it their security and prosperity. They would never be wealthy by San Francisco standards, but they had everything they needed and more. Xander built a small bunkhouse for Tom and the occasional seasonal workers they hired. Zelda started a proper vegetable garden and a flower garden too, because she said a home needed beauty as well as practicality. They went to town together once a week for supplies and church, and gradually They became part of the community. Zelda joined the ladies' sewing circle, though she found some of the gossip tiresome. Xander became friends with other ranchers in the area, sometimes helping them with difficult work and receiving help in return when he needed it. They were building not just a ranch but a life, roots that went deep into the Nevada soil. When Nathan was 5, a new family moved onto the ranch adjacent to theirs. The Martins had come from Ohio, looking for a fresh start after the war had taken their oldest son. They had 3 children left, 2 boys and a girl, and Nathan immediately became friends with Jacob Martin, who was close to his age. Xander and Zelda were glad to have good neighbors, and the 2 families often helped each other and visited back and forth. In the fall of 1875, Zelda discovered she was pregnant again. She was 30 years old now, and this pregnancy felt different from the others, harder on her body. She was tired all the time, and the baby seemed to sit heavy inside her. Xander worried constantly, but Zelda assured him she was fine, just older than she had been with the other 2. Their 3rd child, another son they named Samuel Thomas, was born in early April 1876, and this time there were complications. The baby was breech, and the midwife had to work hard to turn him. Zelda lost a lot of blood, and for a few terrifying hours, Xander thought he might lose her. But Zelda was strong, stronger than anyone gave her credit for, and she pulled through. Baby Samuel was small but healthy, with his father's gray eyes and a loud cry that announced he was ready to take on the world. The doctor, who had finally made it to the ranch for the birth, took Xander aside afterward and told him gently that another pregnancy might be dangerous for Zelda, that her body had been through a lot and might not survive another birth. Xander was shaken by this news, but when he told Zelda later, she simply smiled and said they had 3 beautiful, healthy children, and that was more than enough for anyone. "I do not need more children," she told him, reaching up to cup his face. "I need you. I need the life we have built together." 3 babies is a blessing beyond measure. And so they adjusted, finding ways to prevent another pregnancy while still maintaining the physical intimacy that was such an important part of their marriage. It required care and planning, but they made it work, because the alternative was unthinkable. As the children grew, the ranch house was filled with noise and laughter and sometimes chaos. Nathan was serious and studious, already reading at a level far beyond his years. Emily was adventurous and fearless, always climbing trees or exploring the creek, or trying to ride the horses before she was really big enough. Samuel was affectionate and cheerful, following his older siblings around and trying to keep up with everything they did. Zelda taught all of them at home, since the nearest school was too far away for daily travel. She had a natural gift for teaching, making lessons interesting and adapting to each child's learning style. Nathan soaked up knowledge like a sponge, always wanting to know more. Emily learned best when lessons involved movement or hands-on activities. Samuel needed patience and repetition, but once he learned something, he never forgot it. Xander taught them practical skills, showing Nathan how to mend fences and care for cattle, teaching Emily to ride properly and safely, letting Samuel help feed the chickens and gather eggs. He was a patient father, firm when necessary but always loving, and Zelda often watched him with their children and fell in love with him all over again. The years passed in a blur of work and family and small joys. Birthdays celebrated with precious sugar cake. Christmas mornings with simple gifts and the children's excitement. Summer evenings sitting on the porch while the children played in the yard and Zelda and Xander held hands and watched the sun set over the mountains. In 1880, when Nathan was 10, Emily 7, and Samuel 4, tragedy struck the Martin family. Jacob Martin, Nathan's best friend, was kicked by a horse and died 3 days later from his injuries. The whole community was devastated, but none more so than Nathan, who had never experienced the death of someone his own age before. He withdrew into himself, refusing to talk about his grief, spending hours alone in his room. It was Xander who finally got through to him, taking the boy out on the range one day and sitting him down on a flat rock overlooking their land. "I know you are hurting," Xander said quietly. "I know it feels like the pain will never stop. When my sister died, I thought I would never feel happy again. But you know what I learned?" "What?" Nathan asked, his voice small and broken. "I learned that love does not end just because someone dies. Jacob was your friend, and he always will be. The things you did together, the memories you made, those are yours forever. No one can take them away. And the pain you feel now, that is just proof of how much he meant to you. It is okay to be sad, Nathan. It is okay to cry. That is not weakness, that is being human." Nathan had cried then, really cried, and Xander had held his son and let him grieve. After that, Nathan slowly began to heal, though Zelda noticed he was more thoughtful now, more aware of how fragile life could be. In some ways he seemed older, but she supposed that was part of growing up, learning that the world held sorrow as well as joy. That same year brought better news as well. A new doctor settled in Genoa, a young man named Dr. Harrison, who had trained back east and wanted to bring modern medicine to the frontier. Zelda immediately liked him and appreciated having medical care closer to home. When Samuel came down with a bad fever that winter, Dr. Harrison was able to come to the ranch and treat him, likely saving the boy's life. Xander and Zelda both felt profoundly grateful for this, aware of how easily they could have lost their youngest child. As the children grew older, they each began to show distinct personalities and interests. Nathan, now entering his teenage years, was torn between his love of learning and his sense of duty to the ranch. He helped his father willingly and was good at the work, but Zelda could see his heart was in his books. She talked to Xander about it one night after the children were asleep. "He should have the chance to go to university if that is what he wants," Zelda said. "We do not want him to feel trapped here." "I know," Xander replied, though she could see it pained him to think of Nathan leaving. "When the time comes, we will find a way to send him. I want him to have every opportunity we did not have." Emily, at 11, was becoming quite the horsewoman, able to ride as well as any ranch hand. She also had a gift with animals, able to calm even the most skittish horse or coax a frightened calf to take milk from a bottle. She talked about wanting to train horses when she grew up, and neither Zelda nor Xander discouraged her, even though it was not a common profession for women. Samuel, at 8, was their sunshine child, always happy, always optimistic. He loved being outside, loved helping with the animals, loved listening to his mother's stories at bedtime. He was not as academically inclined as Nathan or as physically fearless as Emily, but he had a kindness and emotional intelligence that served him well. In 1883, Genoa was officially incorporated as a town, and the area began to see more development. A proper general store opened, replacing the old trading post. A hotel was built to accommodate the increasing number of travelers and businessmen passing through. There was even talk of bringing a railroad spur through the area, though that would take years if it happened at all. The changes brought new opportunities and new challenges. Beef prices were better than ever, and the ranch was finally producing real profit, not just subsistence. Xander was able to hire 2 permanent ranch hands, expanding the operation significantly. They bought more land, increasing their holdings to over 1,000 acres. The small ranch that Xander had started alone was becoming a significant operation, and he felt proud of what he and Zelda had built together. But the increased prosperity also brought complications. There were disputes with neighbors over water rights and fence lines. There were cattle rustlers to watch out for, and one year they lost nearly 20 head to thieves before they caught the men responsible. There were bad years when drought or harsh winters killed off part of the herd. Running a ranch was never easy, but as the operation grew larger, so did the problems. Through it all, Zelda was Xander's partner in every sense of the word. She kept the books, managed the household accounts, helped make decisions about the ranch's future. She was not content to be just a wife and mother, and Xander valued her opinions and judgment. They were true partners, and their marriage only grew stronger with the years. In the spring of 1885, when Zelda was 40 years old and Xander was 42, they celebrated their 15th wedding anniversary. The children, now 16, 12, and 9, conspired to give them a day to themselves, taking over all the chores and packing them a picnic lunch. Xander and Zelda rode out to a favorite spot by the creek where they had often gone in the early years of their marriage, when they could steal time alone. They spread a blanket under a cottonwood tree and ate the lunch the children had packed, laughing over the slightly burnt biscuits and overly salty beef. Afterward, they lay side by side on the blanket, looking up through the leaves at the blue sky above. "Did you ever imagine our life would turn out like this?" Zelda asked, lacing her fingers through Xander's. "No," Xander admitted. "When I found you in the snow that day, I never imagined you would become my wife, the mother of my children, my best friend and partner. I just knew I could not let you die." "I am glad you did not let me die," Zelda said softly. "Everything good in my life started that day. You gave me not just survival, but a real life, full of love and purpose." "You gave me the same thing," Xander replied. "Before you, I was just existing, going through the motions. You made me want to build something bigger than myself, something lasting." They were quiet for a while, holding hands, listening to the creek burble over stones and the wind rustle through the cottonwood leaves. "Do you ever regret not going to Virginia City?" Xander asked. "Not becoming a teacher like you planned?" "Not for 1 second," Zelda said firmly. "I did become a teacher, just not the way I expected. I taught our children and I have loved every moment of it, and I got so much more than a job. I got you, I got our family, I got a home and a place where I belong. How could I regret any of that?" Xander turned on his side to look at her, his gray eyes serious. "I love you more today than I did the day we married. I did not know that was possible, but it is true. Every year, every day, I fall more in love with you." "And I with you," Zelda said, reaching up to touch his face, tracing the lines that time and weather had etched there. "You are the best decision I ever made, Xander Kelley." He kissed her then, a kiss that held 15 years of love and commitment and partnership, and Zelda thought that if she had died in that snow all those years ago, she would have missed out on the greatest adventure of her life. As their children grew into young adults, new challenges and joys presented themselves. Nathan, at 17, announced that he wanted to attend university in California. He had been corresponding with professors at the University of California, and they were impressed with his knowledge and eager to have him as a student. Xander and Zelda discussed it at length, and decided that despite the cost and the pain of separation, they would find a way to send him. The day Nathan left for California was one of the hardest of Zelda's life. She had known it was coming, had prepared herself for it, but watching her firstborn ride away in the stagecoach still felt like her heart was being torn out. Xander held her as she cried, his own eyes wet, and they drew comfort from each other as they had always done. But Nathan's letters were frequent and full of excitement about his studies. He was thriving at university, making friends, learning about law and government. He wrote that he wanted to become a lawyer, to help people who could not help themselves, and both Zelda and Xander felt proud that their son had such noble ambitions. Emily, now 14, showed no interest in leaving the ranch. She spent every spare moment with the horses, and Xander began teaching her the finer points of horse training. She had a natural gift for it, and soon neighboring ranches were bringing their difficult horses to her, impressed by how she could gentle even the most stubborn or frightened animal. Zelda worried sometimes that Emily was too isolated, that she should have more friends her own age, but Emily seemed perfectly content with her life. Samuel, at 11, was still deciding who he wanted to be. He helped on the ranch willingly but did not have the passion for it that his father did. He liked reading, though not with Nathan's intensity. He liked animals, though not with Emily's single-minded focus. He was still finding his way, and Zelda and Xander gave him the space to do so. In 1888, when Zelda was 43, her past unexpectedly caught up with her. A lawyer from San Francisco appeared at the ranch one day, bearing news that the man who had tried to claim her all those years ago had died. More surprisingly, he had left a significant sum of money to Zelda in his will, apparently hoping to make amends for his behavior. Zelda was stunned by this news, not sure whether to be angry at the man's presumption or grateful for the unexpected windfall. After much discussion, she and Xander decided to use the money to establish a scholarship fund for children in the area who wanted to attend university, but whose families could not afford it. It seemed a fitting way to turn something that had begun with coercion and control into something that promoted freedom and opportunity. Nathan graduated from university in 1890 with high honors and immediately began working as a lawyer in Sacramento. He came home to visit whenever he could, and it was clear he was happy with the path he had chosen. Zelda and Xander were immensely proud of him, proud that their son was making a difference in the world. That same year, Emily met a young man named James Porter who worked as a ranch hand on a neighboring property. He was quiet and hardworking, and most importantly, he shared Emily's passion for horses. They began courting, and Zelda watched her daughter fall in love with a mixture of happiness and bittersweet recognition. Her little girl was growing up. Emily and James were married in the spring of 1891, in the same church where Zelda and Xander had married 23 years earlier. The wedding was bigger than Zelda and Xander's had been, with neighbors and friends filling the small church, but the joy was the same. Watching Emily pledge her life to James, Zelda squeezed Xander's hand and remembered her own wedding day, remembered how scared and hopeful she had been, how uncertain of the future. Now, looking back over 23 years of marriage, 3 children, countless sunrises and sunsets, joys and sorrows and everything in between, Zelda felt nothing but gratitude. Her life had not turned out the way she had planned when she fled San Francisco all those years ago. It had turned out better. Emily and James built a small house on the Kelley ranch land, and James began working full-time for Xander. With Nathan gone and Emily married, the house felt emptier, but Samuel was still there, now a young man of 15 who was finally coming into his own. He had decided he wanted to be a veterinarian, inspired by Dr. Harrison and by his own love of animals. It would mean more education, but Zelda and Xander were prepared to support him in that dream just as they had supported Nathan's. In 1893, Xander turned 50 years old, and the ranch hands threw him a surprise party. Zelda watched her husband, gray now at the temples and with lines around his eyes from years of squinting in the sun, and thought he was more handsome than he had been at 30. He had aged into himself, become comfortable in his skin, and the love between them had only deepened with time. That night, lying in bed, Xander pulled her close and said, "Thank you." "For what?" Zelda asked, surprised. "For saying yes. For staying. For building this life with me. For giving me children and a home and a reason to get up every morning. For being my partner and my love and my best friend." "You do not need to thank me for that," Zelda said softly. "I got just as much from this marriage as you did. More, maybe. You saved my life in more ways than one." "We saved each other," Xander corrected. "Before you came, I was just going through the motions, working the ranch because it was what I did, not because it meant anything. You gave me purpose. You gave me everything." They made love that night with the tender familiarity of long practice, knowing each other's bodies as well as they knew their own. And afterward Zelda lay in Xander's arms and felt profoundly blessed. The years continued to pass, bringing more changes. Nathan married a young woman named Sarah, whom he had met in Sacramento, and they gave Zelda and Xander their first grandchild, a little girl named Lily. Emily and James had twin boys who immediately became the terrors and delights of the ranch. Samuel went to veterinary school in San Francisco, writing home about the wonders of the city and the fascinating things he was learning. Xander began to slow down a bit, letting the ranch hands take on more of the physical work while he focused on management. He was 57 now, not old but not young either, and the years of hard work had taken their toll on his body. His knees ached in cold weather, and he moved a bit more stiffly in the mornings. But his mind was as sharp as ever, and he ran the ranch with the same care and attention he always had. Zelda, too, felt the passage of time. She was 52, her dark hair now streaked with silver, her face lined with the evidence of a life well lived. Her hands were rough from years of work, and she sometimes found herself tired in ways she had not been when she was younger, but she did not mind. Every line, every ache, was evidence of a life filled with purpose and love. In the spring of 1898, Samuel graduated from veterinary school and returned to Nevada to open a practice in Genoa. He quickly became known as the best animal doctor in the region, and his gentle manner and genuine love for animals made him popular with ranchers and townspeople alike. Zelda and Xander were proud of all their children, proud of the adults they had become, the lives they were building. That summer, the whole family gathered at the ranch for the first time in years. Nathan and Sarah came with their 3 children now, Lily and her younger brothers Thomas and Daniel. Emily and James were there with the twins, now rambunctious 8-year-olds. Samuel came whenever he could spare time from his practice. The house was full of noise and laughter and running children, and Zelda thought she had never been happier. One evening, as the sun was setting and the adults were sitting on the porch while the children played in the yard, Nathan raised his glass of lemonade in a toast. "To Ma and Pa," he said, "for giving us the best childhood anyone could ask for teaching us what love looks like, for building something that will last long after we are all gone." "To Ma and Pa," everyone echoed, and Zelda felt tears sting her eyes. "We just did what any parents would do," she said. "No," Emily said firmly. "You did more than that. You created a home where we always felt safe and loved. You supported our dreams even when they took us away from you. You showed us what a real marriage looks like, what real partnership looks like. That is not something every child gets. Your mother is the one who did that," Xander said, reaching over to take Zelda's hand. "I just followed her lead." "We did it together," Zelda corrected. "Everything we built together." As the sun sank below the horizon and the children's laughter rang out across the ranch, Zelda reflected on the strange and winding path that had brought her here. If that stagecoach had not broken down all those years ago, if she had not decided to walk through the snow, if Xander had been riding a different fence line that day, none of this would exist. Her children would not have been born. This family would not exist. All the love and joy and purpose that filled her life would be nothing but an unrealized possibility. It was a humbling thought, how much of life depended on chance and choice and timing. But Zelda chose to believe that somehow, in some way, she and Xander had been meant to find each other. That cold December day when she had collapsed in the snow and he had carried her to safety, that had been the moment when both their futures changed forever. He had carried her into his house that day, and he had never carried her out. She had stayed, had become part of the very fabric of this place, had put down roots so deep nothing could tear her away. She had become his wife, the mother of his children, his partner in building something that would last. And he had become her everything, her home, her heart, her reason for waking up each day with gratitude. In 1900, Xander and Zelda celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary. It was a big celebration, with everyone in the family coming home, with neighbors and friends invited to mark the occasion. There was food and music and dancing, and Xander waltzed Zelda around the barn floor the way he had taught her to dance all those years ago. His hair was white now, and he moved more slowly than he once had. But to Zelda, he was still the strong young man who had pulled her from the snow and changed her life forever. The new century brought more changes. Nathan was now a respected lawyer, involved in state politics and making a real difference. Emily and James had expanded their horse training operation and were known throughout Nevada for the quality of their work. Samuel's veterinary practice was thriving, and he had recently taken on an apprentice to help with the workload. The ranch that Xander had started alone and built with Zelda was now being run by Emily and James, preparing to pass into the next generation. Xander and Zelda, now in their 60s, had officially retired from the daily running of the ranch, though they still lived there and still helped when needed. They spent their days more quietly now, reading together, sitting on the porch and watching the world go by, playing with their grandchildren when they visited. They had earned their rest, earned the right to slow down and simply enjoy the life they had built. On a cold December morning in 1903, exactly 35 years after the day they met, Xander woke early and watched Zelda sleep. She was 61 now, her hair completely silver, her face deeply lined. But to him, she was as beautiful as she had been at 22. More beautiful, perhaps, because now he knew every part of her, knew her strength and her kindness and her fierce love for their family. He thought about that day 35 years ago, about finding her in the snow, about making the decision to save her. It had seemed like such a small choice at the time, just the human thing to do. He could never have known that in saving her life, he was actually creating his own. Everything good in his life had come from that one decision, that one moment of compassion. His wife, his children, his grandchildren, the life they had built together. All of it traced back to that cold December morning when he had chosen to ride toward that shape in the snow instead of away from it. Zelda stirred and opened her eyes, finding him watching her. She smiled, that same smile that had captured his heart 35 years ago. "Good morning," she said softly. "Good morning," he replied, reaching out to cup her face in his hand. "Did you know that it is 35 years to the day since I found you in the snow?" "I know," Zelda said. "I never forget that date. It is the day my real life began." "Mine too," Xander said. "Mine too." They lay there together as the sun rose, lighting up their bedroom with golden light, and Zelda thought about how far they had come. From that desperate girl fleeing San Francisco and that lonely cowboy working his ranch, to this moment, 35 years later, surrounded by family and love and a lifetime of memories. "I would do it all again," Zelda said suddenly. "Every hardship, every worry, every sleepless night. I would do it all again to end up right here with you." "I would carry you in from that snow 1,000 times over," Xander replied. "And I would never carry you out. You are mine, Zelda Kelley, and I am yours, until the day we die and beyond." "And beyond," Zelda echoed. And then she kissed him, a kiss that held 35 years of love and partnership and unbreakable commitment. As the years continued to pass, Xander and Zelda grew old together in the best way possible. Still deeply in love, still best friends, still finding joy in each other's company. When Xander's health began to fail at 68, Zelda cared for him with patient devotion, reading to him when his eyes grew too tired, sitting with him through the long nights when pain kept him awake, holding his hand and reminding him of all the good times they had shared. When Zelda fell ill a few years later, Xander returned the care, refusing to let anyone else tend to his wife. Their children worried that he was wearing himself out, but Xander would not be dissuaded. She had stood by him through everything, and he would stand by her now. But despite the decline of their bodies, their love never wavered. They still found reasons to laugh together, still held hands when they sat on the porch, still looked at each other as if they were the most precious things in the world. Because to each other they were. Xander passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1908, at the age of 75, with Zelda holding his hand. She mourned him deeply but without regret, knowing that they had used every year they were given to its fullest, that they had built something beautiful together, that their love had been real and lasting and true. Zelda lived 4 more years, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, telling stories about Xander and the life they had built together. She spoke often of that day when she had collapsed in the snow, of how Xander had carried her into his house and into his heart, of how one moment of kindness had blossomed into a lifetime of love. When Zelda passed away in the spring of 1912, she was buried next to Xander on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together. Their headstones stood side by side, marking the resting place of a cowboy and the woman he had saved, who had saved him in return. Below their names and dates were inscribed the words "Together always," and everyone who knew their story agreed that no truer words had ever been carved in stone. The ranch continued to thrive under Emily and James's care, passing down through generations of the Kelley family. The house where Xander had carried Zelda all those years ago still stood, carefully maintained, a monument to the love that had begun there. Each new generation heard the story of how grandmother Zelda had collapsed from cold at the ranch, how grandfather Xander had carried her in, and how he had never carried her out because she had chosen to stay, to build a life with him, to create a legacy of love that lasted long after they were gone. And on cold December mornings when snow fell on the ranch, the family would look out at the white landscape and remember the day it all began, when chance and choice and compassion had brought 2 souls together and created something that would last forever. Because real love, the kind that endures through hardship and joy, through sickness and health, through time and change, that kind of love never truly ends. It lives on in the people it touched, in the lives it shaped, in the stories that are told around fires on cold winter nights. Xander carried Zelda in from the snow that December day in 1868, and in doing so, he carried them both into a future neither could have imagined, a future filled with love and family and purpose. He never carried her out because she never wanted to leave, because she had found in him and in that ranch everything she had been searching for and more. And when their time on earth ended, when they were finally laid to rest together on that hill overlooking the land they had tamed and loved. Their story did not end. It lived on in their children and grandchildren, in the ranch that still bore their name, in the love that still echoed through the house where it all began. Because some stories are too powerful to be contained by death, too meaningful to be forgotten. Some love stories become the foundation on which futures are built, the light that guides generations yet to come. This was one of those stories, this love between a desperate young woman fleeing her past and a lonely cowboy looking for something more than survival. From the moment he pulled her from the snow, their fates were intertwined, their futures merged into one. She had come to his ranch dying from the cold, and he had warmed her back to life, not knowing that in doing so he was also bringing himself fully alive for the first time. Years after they were gone, when their great-grandchildren played in the yard of the ranch house, when new generations of Kelleys worked the land and tended the cattle, the story was still told. Of how love could bloom in the most unexpected places, how one act of kindness could change everything, how two people who had no reason to find each other somehow became the most important people in each other's lives. It was a story about second chances and new beginnings, about choosing love even when it seemed crazy, about building something lasting from a foundation of trust and commitment and unwavering devotion. The ranch still stood, a testament to what they had built together. The house still sheltered their descendants, keeping them warm through cold Nevada winters, just as it had kept Zelda warm that first day. The land still provided, still sustained, still carried the mark of Xander's careful stewardship and Zelda's unwavering support. Everything they had created together lived on, proof that love was not just a feeling but an action, not just a moment but a lifetime, not just a personal choice but a gift that kept giving long after the givers were gone. And so the story ended where it began, with snow falling on a ranch in Nevada, with the memory of a woman who collapsed from cold and a cowboy who carried her in and never carried her out. Because she never left, not really. Even after death, she remained part of that place, part of the legacy she and Xander had built, part of the love that still permeated every corner of the ranch. They had found each other against all odds, had chosen each other when choosing seemed impossible, had loved each other through everything life could throw at them. And that love, that beautiful, enduring, impossible love, had created ripples that would spread forward through time, touching lives not yet lived, inspiring hearts not yet born. This was their story, complete and beautiful and real. A love story that began in snow and cold and desperation, and grew into something warm and lasting and infinitely precious. A story that proved love was worth fighting for, worth risking everything for, worth building a life around. A story that would be told as long as the ranch stood, as long as the Kelley name endured, as long as anyone believed in the power of love to transform lives and create futures, and turn strangers into soulmates. Xander Kelley carried Zelda Crawford into his house on a cold December day in 1868, and from that moment forward, their lives were never separate again. They became one unit, one partnership, one unbreakable bond that survived everything and emerged stronger. He never carried her out because she had found her home, and home was not a place but a person, not a building but a heart, not a destination but a choice made every day to love and be loved in return. And so they lived, and so they loved, and so they left behind something beautiful and lasting and true. Their story, their love, their legacy, all intertwined and inseparable, a testament to what two people could build together when they chose love over fear, commitment over convenience, partnership over independence. They had shown everyone who came after them what real love looked like, and that lesson, that gift, would endure as long as anyone remembered their names. Their story, their incredible journey from strangers in the snow to partners for life, to legends whose love transcended time itself.